As the first light of dawn crept over the Normandy coastline on June 6, 1944, the world stood on the edge of a moment that would shape history. The sky, painted in muted greys and pale gold, revealed a shoreline transformed by war, silent yet brimming with the tension of what was to come. The air was thick with anticipation, the gentle hush of the waves masking the monumental significance of the day. Every grain of sand, every ripple in the surf seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the storm that was about to break. The strategic significance of this day had been building for years. Across the churning waters of the English Channel, a vast armada assembled in secrecy, its presence hinted only by the faint outlines of vessels on the horizon. The Allies had meticulously planned an operation of unprecedented scale, aiming to breach Hitler's Atlantic Wall and open a new front in Western Europe. The Normandy beaches, stretching for miles, were chosen for their geography and their potential to support a massive amphibious assault. The coastline itself became a silent witness to the unfolding drama, its contours and features studied and mapped in exhaustive detail. Omaha Beach, and specifically the Fox Green sector, was a critical target. The terrain here was unforgiving, a wide, flat expanse of sand, overlooked by steep bluffs and riddled with German fortifications. The beach was littered with obstacles, iron hedgehogs, wooden stakes and mines designed to halt any invading force. Each barrier was placed with calculated intent, forming a deadly maze that stretched from the water's edge to the base of the cliffs. The sand, once smooth and untouched, now bristled with the implements of war. The F1 draw, a narrow valley cutting through the bluffs, was one of the few natural exits from the beach. Its sandy floor wound between steep, grass-tufted slopes, offering a rare passage inland. Securing this route was essential for moving vehicles, equipment and supplies beyond the killing ground of the beach. The draw's silent emptiness belied its strategic importance, its shadowed entrance a gateway to the heart of occupied France. In the days and weeks leading up to D-Day, an immense logistical effort unfolded. Supplies were stockpiled in vast quantities, ammunition crates, fuel drums and rations stacked in orderly rows. Vehicles were waterproofed and sealed, their exteriors coated to withstand the salt and spray of the channel. Landing craft, their hulls bobbing in the harbour, were loaded with the tools of liberation. Every detail was scrutinized, from the tides and moon phases to the placement of each obstacle on the beach. The machinery of war stood ready, silent and expectant. The weather played a decisive role in the timing of the invasion. In early June, a powerful storm swept across the channel, churning the waters and grounding the invasion fleet. Meteorologists, poring over charts and barometers, searched for a brief window of opportunity, a break in the weather that would allow the operation to proceed. The fate of the entire endeavour hung on the shifting patterns of wind and cloud, the relentless pulse of the tides. At last a narrow gap in the storm was found. The decision was made. The invasion would begin at first light on June 6th. The fate of Europe would hinge on the success of this single day. The clouds parted just enough to let the pale sun filter through, casting long, uncertain shadows across the sand and steel. The plan called for a devastating aerial and naval bombardment to precede the landing. Warships, their guns trained on the distant bluffs, stood ready to unleash thunderous salvos. Above, bombers soared in formation, their silhouettes stark against the morning sky. The air vibrated with the promise of destruction, the calm before the storm shattered by the roar of engines and the distant rumble of artillery. The bombardment was immense, shaking the earth and filling the air with smoke and dust. Explosions erupted along the bluffs, sending plumes of debris skyward. The landscape was transformed in moments, the once quiet beach now a maelstrom of fire and thunder. Yet the very force of the attack created new challenges. The thick clouds and haze made it nearly impossible for gunners and pilots to see their targets clearly, the chaos of battle obscuring the very obstacles they sought to destroy. As a result, many of the bombs and shells fell behind the German positions, leaving much of the beach's formidable defences untouched. The Atlantic Wall, battered but unbroken, awaited the next phase of the invasion. Barbed wire and tank traps remained, their jagged forms casting menacing shadows across the sand. The stage was set. The elements, sea, sand and sky, had conspired to make the task ahead even more daunting. The fate of the operation, and perhaps the world, now rested on what would unfold on these silent, fortified shores. The beach, swept by wind and mist, stood ready to bear witness to the coming storm, its every feature etched with the weight of history. Along the windswept coast of France, a formidable barrier of concrete and steel stood silent, its presence dominating the landscape. This was the Atlantic Wall, a vast, interconnected system of fortifications stretching for thousands of miles along the shoreline. Its concrete structures, weathered by salt and wind, blended seamlessly into the sand and rock, forming an unbroken line of defence. The coastline bristled with rows of empty bunkers, sandbagged nests and artillery emplacements. Each was positioned with mathematical precision, their fields of fire overlapping and interlocking, creating a seamless web of protection. Years of relentless construction had transformed the landscape. Reinforced concrete and steel were poured into the earth, layer upon layer, forging a labyrinth of fortifications designed to withstand the heaviest bombardment. The very ground was reshaped, moulded into a fortress. Nowhere was this defensive line more imposing than at Omaha Beach. Here massive bunkers loomed over the sand, their thick walls and gun ports commanding every approach, their silhouettes casting long shadows across the shore. Towering bluffs rose sharply from the shoreline, their grassy slopes concealing reinforced positions. From these heights the entire beach lay exposed, every grain of sand within sight of the fortifications above. Machine gun nests carved into the bluffs peered out through narrow slits. Their interlocking fields of fire could sweep the open sand with lethal precision, transforming the beach into a deadly gauntlet. The Fox Green sector stood as a masterpiece of defensive engineering. Obstacles and fortifications crowded the landscape, each one a calculated barrier, each one a silent sentinel. A network of interlocking strongpoints, Widerstandsnest or resistance nests, formed a web of mutually supporting positions. Barbed wire curled around them in tangled knots, and deep trenches snaked between the concrete walls, creating a maze of defences. Each resistance nest was a self-contained fortress. Thick concrete walls and camouflaged exteriors allowed them to blend into the landscape, their gun ports and observation slits the only hints of the power within. Two of the most formidable, WN60 and WN61, guarded the narrow F1 draw. This natural exit from the beach was transformed into a critical choke point, its approaches dominated by concrete and steel. Beneath the surface, a maze of tunnels connected the bunkers. These hidden passageways allowed for unseen movement and resupply, linking strongpoints in a subterranean web. Inside, the bunkers were meticulously organized. Racks of ammunition, crates of grenades and spare barrels for machine guns lined the walls, each item placed for rapid access in the heat of battle. Machine gun emplacements were arranged to create overlapping arcs of fire. Every inch of the beach was swept by bullets, with no blind spots or safe havens, the geometry of defence calculated to perfection. Mortar pits, shielded by thick walls, could unleash explosive shells with pinpoint accuracy. The sand bore the scars of their power, pockmarked with craters from countless detonations. The combined firepower of WN60 and WN61 was overwhelming, Their guns, mortars and machine guns were positioned to halt any advance before it could gain momentum, their muzzles forever pointed toward the sea. Powerful 75mm artillery pieces, housed in reinforced emplacements, were aimed directly at the surf. Their shells could reach far out to sea, threatening any vessel that dared approach. Anti-tank guns, their barrels long and menacing, stood ready to destroy any armoured vehicles that managed to reach the shore. The remains of shattered hulls bore silent witness to their effectiveness. Among these weapons, the 88mm PAK-43 anti-tank gun was especially feared. Its long barrel protruded from a camouflaged casemate, its presence a silent threat to any armoured advance. Only 2 such guns existed along the entire 5-mile stretch of Omaha Beach. Their rarity underscored the strategic importance of this sector, their power unmatched among the defences. The high-velocity shells fired from these guns could pierce the thickest armour, leaving behind twisted wrecks and scorched metal, the aftermath of their destructive force. The thunder of these weapons echoed across the beach, their destructive power a constant threat to anything that dared approach the shore. Beyond the fortifications, the beach itself was transformed into a deadly obstacle course. Barbed wire, mines, and tank traps bristled from the sand, each one a carefully placed hazard. Jagged metal structures known as hedgehogs were scattered across the surf zone. Their angular forms waited to tear open the hulls of landing craft, blocking any advance from the sea. Wooden stakes, some tipped with mines, nicknamed Rommel's asparagus, jutted from the sand. Their explosive charges were poised to detonate at the slightest touch, a hidden menace beneath the surface. Concealed beneath the sand, thousands of landmines lay in wait. Invisible and deadly, they were ready to erupt beneath the weight of any intruder, their presence marked only by the occasional warning sign. The entire beach was a meticulously engineered trap. Every obstacle, every fortification was designed to slow, channel and annihilate anything that attempted to cross, funneling movement into zones pre-sighted for destruction. This was the fortress of steel and sand, silent, forbidding and waiting beneath the dawn mist, its defences ready for the storm that would one day come. The approach to the shore was a battle of elements and steel, a test of machinery against the unforgiving sea, even before a single ramp dropped onto the sand. The English Channel on June 6th was a roiling, hostile expanse. Towering waves crashed against the hulls of the landing craft, tossing them like toys in a relentless, salt-laden wind. Inside the steel bellies of the craft, seawater sloshed across the metal decks, pooling around scattered helmets, rifles and packs. Every jolt sent gear clattering, echoing off the cold, riveted walls. The cold spray of salt water drenched every surface, leaving equipment slick, heavy and glistening under the grey morning sky. Canvas packs and wooden crates grew waterlogged, their contents shifting with each swell. Powerful currents surged beneath the hulls, swirling around the keels and making navigation a constant, nerve-wracking struggle for the machinery. These invisible forces pushed the landing craft eastward, far from their intended targets, sending them drifting across the unpredictable expanse. As a result, many craft ground ashore in the wrong places, their ramps dropping onto unfamiliar stretches of sand, scattering crates and gear in disarray. The air above the shoreline was thick with smoke from the pre-invasion bombardment, a swirling shroud meant to conceal, but instead deepening the confusion. This smoke mingled with the morning mist, forming a dense grey fog that swallowed the coastline, erasing all landmarks and turning the world into a featureless void. From the pilot house, condensation and smoke smeared the glass, rendering the coast invisible. The controls and dials glowed dimly in the gloom, navigation by sight now impossible. The landing craft pressed forward, their engines rumbling, blindly advancing into a wall of smoke and fire. The shoreline hidden behind a curtain of chaos. The carefully timed assault waves dissolved into disorder. Boats scattered across the turbulent sea, their formations broken by the elements. Equipment from different units ended up jumbled together, crates and barrels piled haphazardly on the sand, far from their intended destinations. The resulting chaos left the beach littered with misplaced gear and abandoned craft, the sand scarred by the tracks of heavy machinery and the debris of war. Some landing craft, disoriented by the smoke and current, drifted so far east that they bypassed Omaha Beach entirely, their hulls slicing through unfamiliar waters. In some cases, boats had to abruptly change course, their rudders swinging hard as they turned back toward the distant thunder of battle. Desperate measures were taken at the controls. Steering wheels spun, levers yanked, engines revved, highlighting the urgency and confusion of the moment. Some boats pressed on, their battered hulls groaning, decks strewn with supplies that slid and tumbled with every wave. Others were not so fortunate. The relentless sea overwhelmed them, flipping hulls and flooding compartments. The rough waters claimed countless crates and gear, sending them bobbing and spinning into the deep, churning channel. The landing was scheduled for 6:30 a.m., H-hour, when the first craft were to reach the shore, their silhouettes outlined against the pale dawn. But the punishing conditions delayed many craft, throwing off the entire timetable and leaving the beachhead exposed and unprepared. Some boats did not reach the sand until nearly 7 a.m., their hulls scraping ashore 30 minutes behind schedule. When they finally arrived, many found themselves at the wrong landing zones, their cargo of equipment scattered and unaccounted for on the unfamiliar sand. Ramps dropped into unexpectedly deep water, sending crates and gear sliding out, supplies floating and tumbling in the surf, drifting nearly 200 yards to shore. All the while, the exposed equipment and craft were riddled by relentless machine gun and mortar fire from the bluffs above, metal and wood splintering under the barrage. The chaotic arrival transformed the first moments of the invasion into a desperate struggle for every crate, every barrel, and every battered landing craft, each one a silent witness to the fury and confusion of D-Day. As dawn broke over Omaha Beach, the landscape revealed a stark, unyielding tableau. The open, sloping expanse of wet sand glistened beneath a heavy grey sky, stretching from the restless surf to the looming bluffs. The sand, cold and compacted by the receding tide, was marked only by the presence of obstacles, silent sentinels awaiting the day's events. From the heights above, concrete bunkers and pillboxes gazed out over the shoreline, their dark apertures concealing the cold steel of machine guns and mortars. Artillery pieces, camouflaged and silent, stood ready behind hedgerows, their barrels fixed on the open approaches, forming a web of potential destruction. The beach itself was transformed into a labyrinth of menace. Rows of Czech hedgehogs, jagged ramps and wooden stakes jutted from the sand and surf, their rusted forms creating a maze designed to ensnare and destroy anything that dared to cross. The tide, relentless and indifferent, crept higher with each passing minute. Waves crashed against the anti-landing obstacles, swirling around jagged metal and half-buried timbers, turning the surf into a churning gauntlet of hidden dangers. Barbed wire entanglements snaked across the upper reaches of the sand, their twisted strands glistening with dew and salt. The ground was pockmarked by craters, remnants of bombardment, and the air hung heavy with drifting smoke, obscuring the view and adding to the sense of foreboding. The tactical layout of the defences was a masterpiece of calculated menace. Overlapping arcs of fire, invisible yet ever-present, converged on every sector of the beach, ensuring that no approach was left unguarded. Explosions erupted without warning, sending plumes of sand, smoke, and twisted metal skyward. Shrapnel tore through the air, scarring the landscape and further denying any hope of shelter. From the shadowed interiors of the fortifications, the entire beach appeared as a carefully prepared trap. Every feature, every obstacle, every rise and hollow was designed to slow, channel, and ultimately destroy anything that entered its domain. At the base of the bluff, a narrow shingle bank offered the only semblance of cover. Even here the ground was torn by shell craters and tangled with wire, a final barrier before the steep ascent. In sectors like Fox Green, the geography and defences merged into a nearly impassable barrier. The open sand, littered with obstacles, led only to the foot of bluffs crowned with fortifications. Rangefinders and periscopes, cold and unblinking, scanned the expanse, their lenses tracking every shift in the landscape, ready to direct the fury of the defences with mechanical precision. Inside the bunkers, spent shell casings piled up in drifts, and the barrels of machine guns glowed faintly from the heat of relentless firing, evidence of the ceaseless violence that swept the beach. The aftermath was a landscape of devastation. Smoke drifted over sand, pock-marked by craters, and obstacles stood twisted and blackened, silent witnesses to the fury unleashed upon the shore. Every attempted route across the sand was blocked, by obstacles, by the converging arcs of fire, by the very shape of the land itself. The geography and defences worked in concert to deny passage. The dream of a swift breakthrough was shattered by the brutal reality of the beach's defences. Barbed wire and tank traps lay in ruins, the sand scorched and torn by countless explosions. As the dawn light crept over Omaha Beach, it revealed a world transformed by violence, a place where geography, obstacles and weaponry combined to create an environment of almost insurmountable challenge, indifferent to all who would dare to cross it. Omaha Beach, before any living presence, was a crucible of destruction, its very surface transformed by the relentless fury of war. The shoreline, once tranquil, now bore the scars of ceaseless artillery barrages. The sand, churned and gouged, was pitted with deep craters, each one brimming with brackish water and fragments of shattered equipment. The air itself was thick with acrid smoke, drifting in heavy clouds that clung to the ground and obscured the horizon. Deafening explosions echoed across the expanse as artillery shells erupted in the surf, sending geysers of salt water and sand skyward. The relentless impacts left the earth unstable, the shoreline a patchwork of mud, debris and shattered remnants. Across the beach, jagged steel hedgehogs jutted from the sand, their rusted forms twisted by the force of explosions. Barbed wire snaked in tangled coils, half buried beneath layers of debris and driftwood. Anti-tank obstacles, battered and blackened, stood as silent sentinels, their purpose clear in their menacing design. The terrain was unforgiving, open stretches of sand exposed to the elements, with steep, grassy bluffs looming ahead. Their slopes were torn by the violence of bombardment, pockmarked with craters and scorched by fire. The ground, once firm, had become a mire of mud and waterlogged shell holes, stretching from the restless surf to the base of the cliffs. Artillery impacts sent plumes of sand and water into the air, while the constant barrage left the landscape in perpetual motion, dust and smoke drifting inland, obscuring the battered bluffs and the sky above. Along the tide line, fragments of landing craft and scorched debris lay scattered, half buried by the shifting sands. The relentless pounding of shells and the staccato rattle of machine gun fire reshaped the very earth. Twisted metal and splintered wood from destroyed obstacles littered the ground, while battered remnants of barbed wire became entangled with beach stones and driftwood, forming impassable barriers. In this maelstrom of fire and steel, the battlefield itself was a test of endurance. The features of the land were shaped and reshaped by the violence, craters deepening, fortifications crumbling, and the very sand shifting beneath the weight of destruction. As dusk settled, the scars of artillery, the tangled obstacles and the unforgiving bluffs stood as silent witnesses to the fury unleashed. The beach, stripped of all life, remained a landscape of chaos and devastation, its silence broken only by the distant rumble of war. For hours, the landscape was dominated by the imposing silhouette of Widerstandsnest 60. Concrete bunkers, their surfaces pitted and scarred, rose from the sand like jagged teeth, interlocked by trenches that snaked through the earth. The air vibrated with the thunder of detonations, each blast sending plumes of sand and debris skyward. The terrain itself was a gauntlet, open, exposed and broken only by the occasional crater or the twisted forms of tank traps and barbed wire. The initial barrage met a labyrinth of defences. Barbed wire coiled and rusted, stretched in tangled rows, while angular anti-tank hedgehogs jutted from the sand, their metal frames half buried and battered by the surf. Mines hidden beneath the surface waited in silence, their presence marked only by the occasional eruption of earth and fire. Machine gun nests encased in thick concrete peered out from narrow slits. Their firing arcs overlapped, creating invisible webs of danger that swept the shoreline. The concrete itself bore the scars of previous impacts, chipped and blackened, yet still unyielding. Behind the bluffs, mortar pits and artillery emplacements lay hidden beneath camouflage netting and earth. From these concealed positions, shells arced overhead, their descent marked by shrieking trails and the sudden concussive force of impact. The ground trembled, and the air filled with choking dust and acrid smoke. The arrival of armoured vehicles shifted the balance. Tracks churned through the surf and sand, leaving deep furrows in their wake. The hulls of these machines glistened with seawater and grime, their engines rumbling as they advanced toward the fortifications. 75mm guns roared, their shells slamming into concrete bunkers. Each impact sent shards of stone and steel flying, the force of the blasts echoing across the beach. Firing slits and gun ports crumbled, their edges glowing red-hot before collapsing inward. The combined onslaught of tank fire and bombardment began to unravel the defences. Barbed wire was shredded, its coils flung aside by the force of explosions. Minefields erupted in a chain of detonations, sending fountains of sand and shrapnel into the air. The once flat beach became a landscape of craters, each depression offering new shelter amid the chaos. Breached sections of the defensive line revealed the battered interiors of fortifications, their walls fractured and open to the elements. Explosive charges and jets of flame targeted the entrances and ventilation shafts of the bunkers. Smoke billowed from shattered doorways, curling into the morning sky as the internal structures buckled and collapsed. Inside, twisted metal and shattered concrete marked the end of resistance. Firing ports were reduced to rubble, and the echo of destruction lingered in the stillness that followed. The trench systems, once a network of interlocking protection, now lay breached and exposed. Collapsed fortifications spilled earth and debris down the bluffs, their defensive value erased. As the sun rose higher, the battlefield smouldered. Smoke drifted from ruined bunkers and gun positions, mingling with the morning mist and casting long shadows over the wreckage. The fall of the strong point left a gaping wound in the defensive line, a breach marked by shattered concrete and twisted steel. The way inland now lay open, the once impenetrable barrier reduced to ruins. The capture of Widerstandsnest 60 signalled the first major rupture in the Atlantic Wall at Omaha Beach. The landscape, forever altered, bore silent witness to the collapse of a fortress once thought unbreakable. As the thunder of battle faded from the ruins of WN60, the focus shifted inexorably to the daunting bastion of Widerstandsnest 61. This strong point, a masterpiece of military engineering, stood as a silent sentinel just west of its fallen neighbour, its presence defined by layers of concrete, steel and earth, all meticulously arranged to create a fortress of resistance. WN61's fortifications rose from the sand, their reinforced concrete walls embedded deep into the landscape, forming a network of interconnected bunkers and pillboxes. Each structure was camouflaged with sand and earth, blending seamlessly into the undulating dunes and designed to withstand the most punishing bombardments. The strongpoint's architecture featured overlapping fields of fire, with embrasures and firing slits carefully positioned to cover every approach. Machine gun nests and mortar pits were interlocked by trenches, each segment reinforcing the next, creating a web of defensive power that radiated outward from the core of the position. The F1 draw, a natural break in the coastal bluffs, was transformed into a deadly gauntlet. Barbed wire, anti-tank obstacles and dense minefields layered the exit, all under the unblinking gaze of the strongpoint's fortifications. The environment surrounding WN61 was a tableau of devastation. Craters pockmarked the sand, remnants of relentless shelling. Shattered concrete and twisted metal littered the ground, evidence of the ongoing struggle between fortification and firepower. The elevated position of the strongpoint commanded sweeping views of the beach and its approaches. From this vantage, every movement across the open terrain was exposed, the landscape itself shaped to funnel any advance into pre-sighted kill zones. Sand dunes and shallow depressions offered only fleeting concealment. The open expanse, broken only by the scars of bombardment, favoured the defender's design, amplifying the lethality of the interlocking fields of fire. Debris from shattered obstacles and exploded ordnance was strewn across the approaches, complicating any movement and obscuring lines of sight. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and the ever-present haze of drifting dust. The assault on WN61 was met by a storm of fire. Machine gun and mortar rounds swept the approaches, their trajectories intersecting in deadly arcs from reinforced embrasures and narrow firing slits. The concrete structures, with walls several feet thick, absorbed the impact of shells and shrapnel. Entrances were kept narrow and angled, designed to deflect blasts and limit the effects of explosives. Defensive obstacles, including Czech hedgehogs and anti-landing craft devices, were scattered across the sand, channeling movement into zones already targeted by the strongpoint's defenders. Smoke from burning equipment and shattered bunkers drifted across the landscape, mingling with the dust and sand to create a shifting veil that obscured the battlefield. The environment was a cacophony of sound and fury, sand churned by explosions, the thunder of artillery and the constant rattle of machine gun fire. The strongpoint's defences dominated the scene, their presence felt in every shattered fragment and cratered dune. Surviving armoured vehicles manoeuvred across the sand, their treads grinding over debris as their main guns targeted the concrete bunkers. High explosive shells struck the fortifications, sending shockwaves through the reinforced structures. Each impact cracked bunker walls and sent fragments flying, gradually eroding the integrity of the defensive network. Offshore, United States Navy destroyers joined the assault, their 5-inch guns unleashing salvos that arced over the water and crashed into the strongpoint from the sea. The warships manoeuvred into shallow waters, braving the risk of grounding and enemy fire to bring their guns to bear on the fortifications. Their salvos rained down on WN61, the destructive force of each shell shaking the ground and battering the concrete defences. The naval bombardment was relentless, each impact sending plumes of earth and fragments skyward, transforming the landscape into a maelstrom of explosions and flying debris. The structural integrity of the bunkers was tested to its limits. Some walls collapsed under the sustained bombardment, while others were left cracked and unstable. The accuracy and power of the naval guns devastated the defensive works, shattering concrete and steel and sending shockwaves through the earth. Massive shells exploded within and around the strong point, further destabilizing the defensive network and reducing once imposing structures to broken remnants. The ground itself trembled with each detonation, the landscape transformed into a shattered ruin of scorched earth, twisted metal and pulverized concrete. The combined fire from land and sea overwhelmed the structural defences of WN61. Under this immense pressure, the fortifications began to collapse, their defensive value rapidly diminishing. The once imposing bunkers and obstacles were reduced to smoking, broken remnants. The aftermath revealed a landscape of shattered concrete, twisted steel and scorched earth. The defensive network of WN61, once a formidable barrier, was now breached and rendered ineffective. Trenches and obstacles that had dominated the landscape were now little more than ruins. The environmental transformation was complete, from a deadly stronghold to a devastated open passage. The last vestiges of resistance within the battered structures were eliminated by the overwhelming firepower. With the destruction of WN61's defences, the F1 draw was finally cleared of its last major obstacle. The beach exit, once blocked by formidable fortifications, now lay open amidst the ruins. The path inland was at last unobstructed, the environment forever altered by the destruction of WN61. The Atlantic wall in this sector had been breached, its concrete and steel defences shattered. The formidable barrier that once dominated the Normandy coast was now a landscape of broken fortifications and open ground. The capture of WN61 marked the end of the last significant structural obstacle on Omaha Beach, opening the way for further advance. The F1 draw, once a formidable obstacle, now lay open, its battered earth and shattered fortifications silent witnesses to the day's struggle. The ground, churned and gouged by relentless bombardment, revealed deep scars where once there had been only sand and grass. The silence that followed the chaos seemed to press down on the landscape, amplifying every detail of destruction. The aftermath of battle transformed the beach and its surroundings into a tableau of devastation. Craters pockmarked the sand, their edges blackened by fire, while tangled barbed wire and splintered barricades lay twisted and broken, half buried in the scorched earth. Equipment and debris littered the ground in every direction. Supply crates, their contents spilled and scattered, mingled with ammunition boxes and the shattered hulls of landing craft, now resting awkwardly in the sand, their metal frames torn and battered by the relentless assault. The high ground beyond the beach, once a bastion of defence, now bore the unmistakable marks of bombardment. Shell holes marred the fields, and smoke drifted lazily over the remains of fortifications. Bunkers collapsed inward, their concrete walls fractured and strewn across the landscape. The valley and fields, once undisturbed, had become a maze of churned earth and shattered hedgerows. Anti-tank obstacles, now useless, stood askew in the mud, while the deep tracks of armoured vehicles cut through the ground, leading to the charred remains of machines left behind. Defensive positions, hastily constructed in the chaos, now stood empty and silent. Foxholes, dug deep into the earth, and sandbag barricades, thrown up in desperation, remained as mute evidence of the frantic efforts to hold ground. The air still carried the acrid scent of smoke and explosives, lingering over the transformed environment. Spent artillery shells and jagged fragments lay scattered across the fields, their metallic surfaces dulled by soot and exposure. Nature itself bore the marks of conflict. Hedgerows, once thick and green, were torn apart and crushed beneath the weight of machines. Trees stood splintered and uprooted, while water-filled craters reflected the grey sky above, their surfaces broken by drifting debris. The outskirts of the nearby village, marked by damaged buildings and empty streets, stood in quiet testimony to the violence that had swept through. Rubble choked the crossroads, and fortifications now abandoned crumbled at the edges of the settlement. The beachhead at Fox Green, now eerily quiet, remained fortified. Barricades and tank traps, once vital to defence, stood as silent reminders of the struggle for control, their purpose fulfilled, but their presence enduring. The Atlantic Wall, once an imposing barrier, had been breached. Concrete and steel lay in ruins, gaps blasted open by relentless fire, and pillboxes stood empty, their doors hanging open to the wind. Across the 5-mile stretch of Omaha Beach, the environment had been irrevocably altered. Debris and remnants stretched to the horizon, and from above, the patterns of destruction etched a new geography into the land. As evening fell, long shadows crept across the wreckage. The shoreline, once the site of chaos, now lay quiet, with waves gently washing over the scattered debris, carrying fragments of the day's events out to sea. In time, nature would begin its slow reclamation. Grass crept toward the edges of craters and trenches, and the sand, marked by faded impressions and abandoned gear, hinted at the gradual return of life. Yet the scars of D-Day would remain etched into the earth, a silent memorial preserved in the altered terrain and the remnants left behind. The legacy of the Big Red One on Omaha Beach is etched into the very fabric of Normandy's landscape, where every stone, every relic and every monument silently tells the story of a day that changed history. The bluffs that once bristled with fortifications now rise above the sand as silent guardians, their slopes dotted with stone markers and plaques. Concrete bunkers, weathered by decades of wind and salt, remain embedded in the earth, their dark openings gazing out over the water, forever vigilant. The ground itself bears the scars of conflict. Craters pockmark the landscape, tank traps stand rusted and immovable, and fragments of shattered defences lie half-buried in the sand. These remnants, untouched by time, serve as enduring reminders of the ferocity that once swept across this shore. The F1 draw, once a narrow breach carved through enemy lines, has become a tranquil corridor. Memorial stones and informational markers line its path, each one a silent sentinel, guiding the gaze to the significance of the ground beneath. Flags, now faded by sun and wind, flutter beside stone monuments and commemorative plaques. Their colours, though muted, stand as enduring symbols, woven into the landscape as part of its memory. Granite memorials, their surfaces etched with names and dates, glisten with morning dew. Each inscription is a testament, carved in stone, ensuring that the story of Omaha Beach is preserved in the very elements. As the sun dips below the horizon, the beach is bathed in golden light. Footprints fade with the tide, and the eternal flame of remembrance flickers against the darkening sky, casting long shadows over the sand and stone. The coastline, once a theatre of war, now stretches empty and windswept. Distant silhouettes of memorials and bunkers stand against the sky, their forms unchanging as the seasons pass. Across the expanse, informational signs and preserved artifacts are carefully placed, inviting reflection. Each artifact, whether a rusted fragment or a preserved structure, is a chapter in the story of the Big Red One's assault, woven into the landscape itself. Barbed wire, twisted and weathered, and tank obstacles, their metal frames corroded by time, have become part of open-air displays. These relics, once instruments of war, now serve as educators, their presence a lesson in resilience and remembrance. The Normandy American Cemetery, its rows of markers stretching toward the horizon, is framed by manicured lawns and the gentle rise and fall of the land. The symmetry and order of the markers create a landscape of solemnity and reflection. Stone monuments, inscribed with the story of D-Day, stand against the backdrop of sea and sky. Their words, chiselled deep, ensure that the lessons of the past remain present, unyielding to the passage of time. At dawn, gentle waves wash over the sand, and the distant view of memorial crosses emerges from the mist. The beach, transformed by memory, holds the legacy of the big red one in its every grain. As clouds drift overhead and shadows move across the monuments and preserved defences, the landscape continues its silent vigil. The memory of what happened here is held not in words, but in stone, sand and sky, never to be forgotten. Across the broad expanse of Omaha Beach, a silent legion of guardians once stood, their forms etched into the sand and surf. The shoreline, at first glance a tranquil meeting of land and sea, was transformed into a landscape of calculated menace. Steel and concrete, shaped by human hands but now devoid of presence, rose from the earth in rigid lines and jagged silhouettes. Each obstacle, meticulously placed, became a sentinel, unyielding, unmoving, and ever watchful. Foremost among these were the Czech hedgehogs, angular clusters of interlocked steel beams, their surfaces pitted and scarred by salt and time. Anchored deep within the sand, their arms reached outward in a frozen tangle, forming a barrier that defied the tide. The jagged limbs of these structures thrust in every direction, their sharp edges poised to tear through anything that dared approach. The surf lapped at their bases, but the hedgehogs remained steadfast, their shadows stretching long and thin across the morning sand. No matter the hour, these geometric forms cast stark, angular shadows, silent warnings etched in darkness and light, marking the boundary between safety and peril. Nearby, the Belgian gates loomed, massive steel frames, their latticework resembling the skeletons of forgotten giants. Rising from the sand and shallows, they formed a wall of cold, unyielding metal. Each gate, immense and immovable, blocked the natural pathways of the beach. Their weight pressed into the earth, their presence an immovable fact of the landscape. Triangular supports and heavy crossbars braced these structures, their angles and intersections forming a puzzle of steel that defied easy passage. The gates stood as barriers, their forms designed to resist all force and ingenuity. Scattered among these sentinels, hidden from sight, lay countless mines, small, silent and deadly. Some nestled beneath the sand, their metal casings barely visible, blending seamlessly with the grains above. Others rested just beneath the surface, their mechanisms primed to respond to the slightest pressure. Invisible to the eye, they waited in patient silence, their threat as real as the steel above. Some obstacles bore explosive charges, their detonators affixed to steel and concrete, ready to unleash destruction at the faintest touch. These hidden dangers multiplied the peril of the landscape, their presence felt but never seen. The sand itself became a field of uncertainty, each grain concealing the possibility of sudden violence. The guardians of Omaha were not only visible, they were buried, embedded, and entwined with the very earth. Together, these objects and structures formed a layered defense, each element reinforcing the next. The beach was transformed into a gauntlet, its every feature designed to delay, channel, and expose anything that crossed its threshold. The very environment became a weapon, shaped by steel, armoured by concrete, and laced with explosives. The sand, the surf, the obstacles, and the mines all conspired to create a landscape of relentless resistance. Today, the remnants of these guardians endure. Rusted hedgehogs, battered gates, and the faint outlines of craters linger on the shore, their forms softened by time but never erased. These silent sentinels remain, mute witnesses to the ingenuity and determination that once shaped the very bones of Omaha Beach. Their presence is a stark reminder of a time when the environment itself became the ultimate guardian. Before the first light crept over the horizon, the world above Omaha Beach was a canvas of shifting clouds and muted dawn colours. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the distant tang of cordite as a heavy mist clung to the rolling surf and the sand beyond. The sea itself was restless, its surface rippling with the low growl of engines and the distant rumble of thunder, not from the sky, but from the steel leviathans lurking just beyond sight. Lined up in silent formation, an armada of warships loomed on the horizon, their silhouettes stark against the pale morning sky. The water churned beneath their hulls, each vessel bristling with machinery and anticipation, their decks crowded with the silent promise of unleashed power. Suddenly the stillness shattered. Battleships, their immense hulls slicing through the waves, brought their towering gun turrets to bear. With a deafening roar, 16-inch cannons erupted, each shell a steel giant weighing as much as a small car, hurtling through the air, trailing smoke and fire. Cruisers and destroyers joined the barrage, their rapid-firing artillery adding a relentless staccato to the symphony of destruction. Flashes of orange and white split the gloom, and thick plumes of smoke curled skyward, mingling with the low-hanging clouds. The landscape itself convulsed as thousands of tons of ordnance rained down. The sand leapt and shuddered, the very earth recoiling from the violence unleashed upon it. Each impact gouged new craters into the shoreline, sending fountains of sand and debris high into the air. The beach, once smooth and untouched, became a patchwork of scars and smouldering wounds. Concrete fortifications, their grey forms jutting from the dunes, shuddered under the onslaught. Walls cracked and buckled, fragments tumbling into the chaos as explosions tore through their armoured shells. Barbed wire entanglements and wooden stakes, once formidable barriers, were ripped apart by the blasts. Steel obstacles, twisted and blackened, bore the marks of near misses and direct hits, their jagged forms scattered across the sand. The thunder of naval fire rolled across the water, echoing for miles, a ceaseless drumbeat that reverberated through the mist and over the waves, softening the shoreline's defences with every passing minute. Smoke and dust billowed from the bluffs, swirling in the wind and cloaking the intricate web of pillboxes, trenches and gun emplacements in a shifting, impenetrable haze. The very contours of the beach began to change. Dunes collapsed, their sandy slopes sliding into new shapes while sea walls crumbled, their stones tumbling into the surf. Yet beneath the swirling smoke and drifting sand, some fortifications endured. Reinforced bunkers, battered but unbroken, remained hidden in the haze, their concrete shells defiant against the storm. The guns had scarred the landscape and battered the defences, but the intricate maze of obstacles and the hidden menace of mines still lurked beneath the surface, waiting in silence. As the bombardment faded, the beach was transformed, scarred, reshaped, and cloaked in a heavy silence, the battered shoreline awaiting the next phase of the storm. From the horizon, the thunder of naval guns rolled across the water, their flashes illuminating the pre-dawn gloom. The sea itself seemed to tremble as shells arced toward the distant shore, the surface rippling with the shock waves of each broadside. High above, the coastline stretched out in a jagged line, sand and surf meeting the land in a pale ribbon. From this altitude the beaches appeared silent and still, the only movement the slow drift of morning mist over the dunes. As dawn broke, the sky filled with the silhouettes of aircraft, wings glinting in the first rays of sunlight, engines humming in a steady, relentless chorus. The formations moved with purpose, casting fleeting shadows over the patchwork of fields and hedgerows below. Sleek reconnaissance planes glided ahead, their streamlined forms slicing through the cool morning air. They traced invisible paths above the landscape, their presence marked only by the faint glimmer of metal and the whisper of wind over wings. Cameras, mounted beneath the fuselages, captured the intricate patterns below, lines of trenches, angular bunkers, and the subtle disruptions in the sand that betrayed hidden fortifications. Each photograph revealed a tapestry of earthworks and obstacles woven into the natural contours of the land. The images, transmitted with urgency, became maps of vulnerability and strength. Every shadow and outline was scrutinized, every curve of the shoreline measured and marked for the next phase of destruction. Soon the sky darkened with the arrival of heavy bombers. B-17S and B-24S lumbered across the heavens, their massive forms blotting out the sun in slow, deliberate procession. Engines roared in unison, a deep, rolling thunder that vibrated through the clouds. The bombers flew in tight geometric patterns, their wings nearly touching as they pressed onward. Below, the coastline was transformed by streaks of coloured smoke and bursts of flares. These signals painted the sand in vivid hues, marking invisible lines and targets amid the shifting haze. Bombs tumbled earthward in carefully calculated grids, their descent almost graceful from above. The explosions rippled across the sand in a deadly sequence, each detonation sending shock waves through the ground and air. The sand erupted in towering geysers, columns of earth and smoke rising skyward before collapsing back to the scarred surface. Concrete fortifications shuddered under the impacts, their surfaces fractured and pitted by the relentless barrage. Trenches vanished beneath clouds of dust and debris, their outlines blurred by the violence from above. The landscape transformed with each passing wave. Craters pockmarked the dunes, barbed wire flattened and twisted, the once familiar contours of the beach erased by fire and force. Above, fighter aircraft darted and weaved through bursts of flak and streaks of tracer fire, their paths erratic as they danced through the chaos. P-47. Thunderbolts and typhoons swooped low, their shadows racing across the battered earth as they unleashed rockets and bombs on the shattered ground below. Trails of smoke and fire marked the paths of rockets, each one seeking out nests of resistance hidden among the ruins and sand. The earth was torn open, blackened craters and plumes of smoke rising in a grim testament to the fury unleashed from above. As the bombardment faded, the landscape smouldered, smoke drifting over the beaches, explosions echoing in the distance, the air thick with dust and the scent of scorched earth. Amid the swirling haze, shapes emerged, some battered, some untouched. Fortifications and obstacles half buried beneath the shifting dust, their outlines ghostly and uncertain. The beach and its approaches, once smooth and unbroken, now lay scarred and transformed, the sand reshaped by fire and steel, awaiting the next chapter in the unfolding storm. Beneath the heavy clouds of smoke and dust, the true backbone of the invasion began to emerge, not in the form of soldiers, but in the relentless advance of machines and supplies. As the first waves battered the shore, the next phase of the operation unfolded with clockwork precision. Amphibious tanks shrouded in spray crawled from the surf, their tracks digging furrows into the wet sand. LSTs, landing ship tanks, lowered their ramps, disgorging trucks, jeeps and armoured vehicles onto the chaotic beaches. Pallets of ammunition, crates of rations and rolls of barbed wire tumbled out, forming makeshift supply dumps behind the rising dunes. Bulldozers, their engines roaring, pushed aside wreckage, carving out rough roads and clearing paths through obstacles. Portable bridges and steel matting were unfurled across the soft sand, creating vital lanes for vehicles to pass. Fuel drums and water tanks lined the shore, ready to sustain the growing beachhead. All the while, the sea continued to deliver its cargo artillery pieces, radios, medical supplies, and endless stacks of ammunition. Each piece found its place, guided by coloured flags and painted markers, transforming the beach into a sprawling logistical hub. In this orchestrated ballet of steel and supply, the foundation of the invasion was laid, one crate, one vehicle, one landing at a time. The machinery of war pressed forward, forging a lifeline between the ships at sea and the hard-won ground beyond the surf. The tank treads crushed the sand beneath them, each mechanical part moving in unison, a testament to engineering prowess. Cranes lifted heavy artillery from the ships, their mechanical arms swinging with precision, adding to the arsenal on the shore. Conveyor belts moved supplies from the ships to the beach, ensuring a seamless flow of logistics. Fuel pumps and hoses were meticulously set up, creating refueling stations that would keep the machinery running. An intricate network of cables and communication lines was established, forming the nerve centre of the invasion. Mechanical loaders stacked crates with precision, their automated systems ensuring efficiency and speed. Amphibious vehicles, water dripping from their sides, continued to emerge from the sea, each one a marvel of wartime engineering. The beach, now transformed into a logistical hub, showcased machinery and supplies working in perfect harmony, a testament to the meticulous planning and execution of the invasion. Dawn broke over the Normandy coast, the sky cloaked in a heavy, uncertain grey. The horizon blurred where the sea met the clouds, as if the world itself hesitated to reveal what lay ahead. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by the distant, restless murmur of the ocean. Low, brooding clouds pressed down upon the coastline, their bellies swollen with the promise of rain. They drifted slowly, obscuring the first rays of sunlight, casting the land in a dim, uncertain light that seemed to stretch the dawn into an endless moment. The English Channel heaved and rolled, its surface whipped into peaks and troughs by the persistent wind. Swollen by the pull of a spring tide, the waves surged with a wild, untamed energy, their white crests dissolving into spray as they collided with one another. Each swell crashed against the shingle and sand, the surf thundering in relentless rhythm. The shoreline trembled beneath the force, as if the land itself braced against the ocean's assault. A thick mist clung to the water's surface, swirling and shifting with every gust of wind. It crept inland, weaving between the dunes and bluffs, shrouding the coast in a ghostly veil that ebbed and flowed with the breeze. Visibility danced on the edge of nothingness, shrinking to a few paces before suddenly expanding, only to contract again as the fog thickened. The world became a patchwork of clarity and obscurity, dictated by the ever-changing whims of the weather. Overhead, the cloud cover shifted and swirled, sometimes thinning to let a pale, watery light filter through, then thickening again to cast long, uncertain shadows across the sand. The interplay of light and darkness painted the beach in sombre tones. The tides moved with silent authority, racing in and out in a ceaseless lunar rhythm. Water surged forward, swallowing the land, then retreated, revealing secrets hidden beneath the waves. At low tide the sea relinquished its hold, exposing sandbars and jagged obstacles that glistened with brine. These features, normally hidden, emerged as silent sentinels waiting in the shallow surf. As the hours passed, the tide crept higher, inch by inch, reclaiming the beach. Water advanced steadily, swallowing stones, driftwood, and the contours of the land, reshaping the shoreline with every heartbeat. Gusts of wind swept across the water, tugging at the waves and scattering salt spray into the air. The wind's howl mingled with the roar of the surf, carrying the scent of brine and the chill of distant storms. Above, the sky darkened as storm clouds gathered, their edges flickering with the threat of rain. Thunder rumbled far out to sea, a low warning that echoed across the open water. Every element, cloud, tide, wind and wave, conspired in a silent symphony, each force shaping the landscape in its own way. The beach became a stage for nature's relentless power, its every feature moulded by the day's wild temperament. In this arena, nature reigned supreme, imposing delays, granting fleeting opportunities, and forever etching its presence into the memory of the coast. The story of the day was written not just in sand and stone, but in the ever-changing moods of sky and sea. As the tide receded from Omaha Beach, it revealed a landscape transformed by violence. The once serene shore now lay in stark contrast to its former self. Shattered remnants of landing craft lay half buried in the sand, their twisted hulls rusting in the salty air. These silent sentinels spoke of the chaos that had unfolded. Scattered across the shore, unexploded shells and mortar rounds glinted dully, their threat lingering long after the guns fell silent. Each piece of ordnance a reminder of the peril that once loomed. Barbed wire, torn from its posts, trailed like seaweed along the tide line. The twisted metal, now a part of the natural landscape, whispered of the barriers that once stood. Craters pockmarked the dunes, their edges raw and exposed, while scorched earth marked where fire had swept through the tall grass. These scars on the earth told tales of explosions that had reshaped the land. Metal fragments, jagged and blackened, mixed with driftwood and seaweed, forming a new, unnatural layer atop the beach. This debris, a fusion of war and nature, painted a picture of the conflict's aftermath. Oil slicks shimmered on shallow pools left by the retreating tide, and the air carried the acrid scent of fuel and cordite. These pools, reflecting the sky, held within them the essence of the battle's residue. The once pristine shoreline bore the scars of battle, silent testaments to the force unleashed upon it, and to the enduring presence of war in the environment long after the last echo had faded. The landscape, forever altered, stood as a monument to the past, its every feature a chapter in the story of conflict. On Omaha Beach, the clash of armies was shaped as much by engineering as by arms. The German defenders relied on the formidable Atlantic Wall, a network of fortifications meticulously designed to repel any invasion. Concrete bunkers, known as Widerstandsnest, were embedded deep into the dunes and bluffs. These pillboxes featured reinforced walls up to 2 meters thick, angled to deflect incoming shells and equipped with narrow firing slits for machine guns and artillery. Many were interconnected by covered trenches, allowing defenders to move unseen between positions. Rows of anti-tank obstacles, nicknamed Czech hedgehogs, were scattered along the tidal flats. Crafted from steel beams, these angular barriers were anchored in the sand to rip apart landing craft and halt vehicles. Wooden stakes, called Rommel's asparagus, jutted from the shallows, often tipped with mines to destroy boats and hinder infantry. Behind the beach, the defenders dug zigzagging trenches lined with sandbags and logs. These not only provided cover from shrapnel, but also channeled attackers into kill zones. Barbed wire entanglements, layered in multiple rows, funneled advancing troops toward pre-sighted fields of fire. The Allies, in contrast, brought engineering innovation to the assault. Armoured bulldozers and demolition teams, known as gap assault teams, were tasked with breaching the beach defences. They used explosives to clear barbed wire and blast paths through minefields. Temporary rhino tanks, fitted with steel prongs, ploughed through obstacles, while portable bridging units allowed men and vehicles to cross craters and anti-tank ditches. Every fortification, barrier and trench was a product of careful calculation, a silent contest of ingenuity. On Omaha Beach, the battlefield itself became an adversary, its engineered defences shaping the fate of the day. In the wake of the storm, Omaha Beach entered a long, silent metamorphosis. The once violent shoreline, battered by chaos, began to yield to the slow, patient work of nature. The sand, once torn open by explosions and littered with twisted metal, gradually smoothed itself beneath the ceaseless rhythm of the tides. Craters softened, their sharp edges worn down by wind and water as the shoreline reclaimed its gentle curve. In the churned earth, the first green shoots appeared, grasses and wildflowers weaving a living tapestry across the dunes. Roots gripped the shifting sand, binding it together, while petals unfurled in the breeze, painting the landscape with colour and life. Concrete bunkers and pillboxes, once stark and unyielding, stood in silent witness as the tides ebbed and flowed. Their cold surfaces, battered by salt and spray, began to blend into the landscape. Moss crept across the stone, lichen traced delicate patterns over concrete, and the hard lines of war softened beneath layers of green. Some structures crumbled, their fragments scattered and buried by drifting sand, while others endured, transformed into quiet monuments by the slow artistry of nature. The rusted skeletons of obstacles, once designed to halt and destroy, settled deeper into the sand. Over time they became part of the landscape, sheltering tide pool creatures and offering perches for birds, their jagged forms softened by the elements. Seasons passed and the land healed. Dunes grew lush with grasses, wildflowers flourished, and the scars of conflict faded beneath layers of new growth. The shifting sands, once unsettled by violence, found stability as roots anchored them in place. The beach's contours grew gentle, shaped by wind and water, and the restless earth settled into quiet harmony. Life returned in abundance. Coastal plants spread across the shore, and migratory birds traced ancient paths overhead, pausing to rest and nest among the dunes. The shoreline became a sanctuary for creatures great and small, each finding a place in the renewed tapestry of the coast. The sea, tireless and eternal, washed over the sand day after day. Each wave erased the marks of the past, leaving only faint traces beneath the surface, a memory held in the rhythm of water and the shifting of grains. Omaha Beach endures as a sanctuary shaped by the elements. Its landscape, sculpted by wind, water and time, holds the memory of transformation in every dune and every stone. As dusk settles, sand, sea and sky blend in quiet harmony. A living testament to resilience, where nature's gentle persistence has reclaimed a place once marked by turmoil. It's 2S. Beyond the solemn monuments and historical markers, Omaha Beach has undergone a profound environmental resurgence. The legacy of the battle left an indelible mark on the landscape, but nature has an extraordinary capacity to heal and renew. The tides, ever persistent, became the first agents of change. Each wave carrying with it the memory of distant storms, gently washed away the remnants of war. Salt water, with its corrosive touch, began to erode the metallic fragments, dissolving them into the sands. Over decades, the sea returned the beach to its natural state, a process both relentless and tender. The sand, once churned and scarred, settled into new patterns. Wind and water worked in concert, redistributing grains into smooth, undulating dunes. These dunes, shaped by the elements, now stand as silent sentinels, their curves a testament to the passage of time and the power of nature's touch. Beneath the surface, the soil began to recover. Microorganisms, the unseen architects of the earth, broke down the remnants of conflict, transforming them into nutrients. This renewal of the soil provided a fertile bed for new life. Coastal grasses with their deep roots took hold, stabilizing the shifting sands. These grasses, resilient and hardy, created a foundation for further growth. In the intertidal zones, marine life flourished. Tide pools, once disrupted by violence, became havens of biodiversity. Anemones, starfish and crabs found sanctuary in the rocky crevices, their vibrant colours a stark contrast to the muted tones of the sand. Seaweed, swaying gently with the currents, provided shelter for small fish and invertebrates, creating a delicate, interconnected ecosystem. As the land healed, the air above Omaha Beach filled with the calls of seabirds. Gulls, terns and plovers returned to nest among the dunes, their presence a sign of the restored balance. These birds, with their migratory patterns, linked Omaha Beach to distant shores, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all natural landscapes. The plant life, too, began to thrive. Wildflowers painted the dunes with bursts of colour, their blooms attracting pollinators. Bees and butterflies flitted from flower to flower, ensuring the continuation of life. Each season brought new growth, a cycle of renewal that echoed the resilience of the land. In the quiet moments when the wind is still and the waves gently lap the shore, the transformation of Omaha Beach is most evident. The scars of the past have been softened by nature's hand, replaced by a landscape that speaks of peace and renewal. The beach, once a theatre of war, now stands as a testament to the enduring power of nature to restore and heal. WWII. Across the shifting sands of Omaha Beach, the silent march of technology left a legacy as profound as any battle. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, the shoreline became a proving ground for innovation, where steel met sand and ingenuity was tested against the elements. The first to arrive were the landing craft, LCVPs, their shallow drafts designed to breach the surf and deposit their precious cargo directly onto hostile shores. Their hulls, crafted from plywood and steel, braved churning waters and underwater obstacles. Some bore modifications, armoured shields, reinforced ramps and camouflage netting, each adaptation a response to the evolving demands of amphibious warfare. Just beyond the surf, specialised tanks rumbled forward. Among them, the amphibious duplex drive Sherman, or DD tank, was perhaps the boldest experiment. Encircled by a collapsible canvas screen and powered by twin propellers, these machines were engineered to swim ashore under their own power. Many succumbed to the sea, but those that made landfall became armoured bulwarks, supporting the advance with their 75mm guns. On the beach itself, mechanical ingenuity took new forms. Armoured bulldozers, their blades reinforced, pushed aside obstacles and carved out makeshift roads from shingle and sand. The British-engineered Hobart's funnies, including the Churchill AVRE with its spigot mortar and the Sherman crab mine flail, were designed to neutralise mines and clear paths through barbed wire and concrete. Though few appeared at Omaha, their influence shaped future strategies. Nestled among the dunes and bluffs, German fortifications showcased their own technological prowess. Concrete bunkers, or Widerstandsnest, bristled with machine guns, mortars and anti-tank cannons. Ingeniously sited for overlapping fields of fire, these strong points were defended by layers of obstacles, check hedgehogs, steel rails and underwater mines, each intended to stall and channel the invaders. Above it all, radar installations and encrypted communications networks silently coordinated defences, their signals weaving invisible threads through the chaos below. Offshore, naval gunfire support provided by battleships and cruisers unleashed precision barrages, guided by spotter aircraft and radio triangulation, a symphony of coordination and destructive power. As the battle raged, technology adapted. Engineers deployed Bangalore torpedoes, long tubes packed with explosives, sliding them under barbed wire and detonating to clear a path. Flamethrowers, demolition charges and satchel explosives targeted the most stubborn bunkers, each innovation born of necessity and urgency. In the decades that followed, the relics of these machines surrendered to the elements, their metal frames corroded and buried by shifting sands. Yet their imprint endures, etched in the landscape, preserved in the silent evolution of military technology. Here, on Omaha Beach, the relentless drive for innovation left its mark, not in the form of monuments, but in the subtle interplay of steel, sand, and the ever-advancing march of invention. Before the thunder of steel and fire, Omaha Beach was a realm shaped by tide and wind, a living tapestry woven from salt, sand, and sun. At the edge of the surf, beds of eel grass swayed in the shallows, their slender blades sheltering darting sand eels and the delicate eggs of cuttlefish. Tiny anemones clung to submerged rocks, opening their tentacles to the rhythms of the sea, while ghost crabs scuttled sideways along the waterline, leaving fleeting patterns on the morning beach. Beyond the reach of the waves, the dunes rose in gentle undulations, anchored by the deep roots of marram grass. These tough, spiky blades braced the sand against the wind, creating pockets of calm where wild thyme and sea holly could take hold. In the early light, skylarks hovered above, their trills mingling with the whisper of the breeze, while meadow pipits darted between tufts of grass in search of hidden insects. As the tides shifted, so too did the cast of life. Shorebirds, oyster-catchers, sandpipers and plovers patrolled the intertidal zone, probing the wet sand for worms and tiny crustaceans. Mussels clustered on exposed rocks, their shells glistening with the spray, while limpets held fast through every surge. Amid the chaos of battle, the rhythm of nature faltered. The roar of engines and the weight of machinery churned the sand, scattering flocks and silencing burrows. Yet, even as the tides washed away footprints and debris, the beach began to heal. Seeds, carried on the wind, found purchase in the disturbed dunes. Hardy succulents and pioneering grasses crept back, their roots stitching the sand once more. In the years that followed, the cycles of tide and season reclaimed the shore. Wildflowers bloomed in the shelter of the dunes, and butterflies returned to dance among the blossoms. The songs of birds, once drowned by thunder, echoed again over the water. Beneath the surface, crabs and mollusks resumed their ancient routines, weaving new stories in the ever-changing sands. Today, Omaha Beach is again a sanctuary for life, its ecosystems quietly resilient, its flora and fauna bearing silent witness to both loss and renewal. Here, between the tides, nature endures, restoring balance one wave at a time. Beneath the shifting dunes and along the battered shoreline, a silent network of defences awaited the rising tide. These were the guardians of concrete and steel, structures designed not for beauty but for endurance. The bunkers, or Widerstandsnest, were moulded from reinforced concrete poured into wooden forms, their walls often exceeding 2 meters in thickness. Each was set low into the earth, angled to deflect the shock of incoming shells, their gun ports carved like narrow eyes gazing across the sand. Steep ramps and camouflaged hatches led to interior chambers, where ammunition was stored in cool, dry recesses, shielded by layers of gravel and earth. Beyond the bunkers, a maze of obstacles stretched into the surf. Rows of check hedgehogs, crossed steel beams welded into deadly X-shapes, jutted from the shallows, designed to halt landing craft and tear through hulls. Scattered among them, Belgian gates, triangular frames of metal braced with barbed wire, stood as immovable barricades. Closer to the waterline, wooden stakes, sharpened and sometimes capped with mines, waited beneath the waves to impale and explode. These obstacles were anchored deep, their bases buried in sand or bolted to buried concrete blocks, resisting the relentless pull of the tides. The entire defensive web was calculated, fields of fire overlapped, obstacles funneled movement, and every angle was measured for maximum effect. Camouflage netting draped over the bunkers, blending their harsh lines into the dunes. Even the colour of the concrete was chosen to match the pale sand. Drainage channels and ventilation shafts were hidden from view, ensuring that the structures stood ready for any storm, natural or man-made. Today, though softened by time and reclaimed by wild grasses, these fortifications remain. Silent and unyielding, they are monuments to engineering, built to withstand not just the fury of battle, but the endless assault of sea and wind. Their forms, half buried and weathered, are lessons in resilience, their purpose forged in calculation and stone. Above the restless channel, the fate of the invasion hung not on weapons or walls, but on the unseen patterns of air and sea. Weather forecasting, an art and a science, became the silent architect of the operation. High above, pressure systems shifted and merged, sending waves of cloud and wind across the horizon. Instruments in remote outposts recorded subtle changes, a drop in barometric pressure, a veering wind, the slow approach of a storm front. In the days before the landing, the North Atlantic brewed a tempest. Low clouds gathered, rain lashed the coast, and visibility shrank to a narrow, uncertain world. Barriers of fog and mist threatened to blind the navigators and drown the assault in chaos. Across the channel, tides, guided by the gravitational pull of the moon, surged and retreated, their timing dictating when obstacles would be hidden or exposed. Forecasters, poring over coded weather maps, traced the paths of cold fronts and warm air masses. Each isobar, each swirl of wind, carried the weight of the operation's success or failure. A narrow window opened, a brief lull in the storm, a temporary clearing. It was a fragile promise, hours of relative calm in a sea of turbulence. The decision to proceed was not made lightly. The tides would rise and fall as scheduled, but the weather's favour was fleeting. Clouds might close again, winds might shift, and the channel could become impassable in the blink of an eye. The forecast became the silent signal, an invisible hand guiding ships and planes, synchronizing every movement with the rhythm of the earth and sky. As the first light broke over the channel, the weather's verdict was revealed. The winds abated just enough, the clouds parted for a fleeting moment, and the tides aligned with the plan. The machinery of invasion rolled forward, its gears set in motion by calculations written in air and water. In the end, it was not just fortitude or firepower, but the subtle language of weather that shaped the course of history on these shores. Beneath the shifting sands and crashing tides of Omaha Beach, a silent archive endures, one sculpted not by living hands, but by the enduring presence of non-human artifacts. Decades after the thunder of conflict faded, the beach remains a living museum, its secrets buried just beneath the surface. Rusting fragments of steel hedgehogs, once intended to halt the advance of landing craft, now rest half-submerged, their angular forms softened by years of salt and surf. Jagged shards of tank traps protrude from the dunes, their original menace dulled, yet their geometry still unmistakable against the undulating landscape. Concrete bunkers, their interiors hollowed by time and tide, stand as silent sentinels, sentient only in their stubborn resistance to erosion and neglect. Scattered among the stones, corroded shell casings and unexploded ordnance lie hidden, their chemical composition slowly transforming as they merge with the earth. Barbed wire, tangled and oxidized, weaves through the undergrowth, a persistent reminder of boundaries once fiercely defended. In the tidal pools, fragments of shattered hulls and machinery have become encrusted with barnacles and seaweed, forming new habitats for marine life even as they retain the unmistakable shape of their engineered origins. These artifacts, untouched by human hands for generations, mark the passage of time in their own language, a lexicon of rust, concrete and alloy. Each piece, whether visible or submerged, tells a story not in words or images but in molecular decay, in the gradual return of the artificial to the natural. As the seasons turn and the beach reshapes itself, these relics remain, sometimes revealed by a receding tide, sometimes hidden by a fresh drift of sand. Their legacy is not in the memories they evoke, but in the physical imprint they leave behind, a testament to the collision of human intention and the relentless forces of nature. Omaha Beach, once a stage for monumental events, is now a canvas where the artifacts of conflict slowly dissolve into the landscape, their presence felt only by the elements that continue to shape them. Across the broad expanse of Omaha Beach, a quiet transformation unfolds, one not marked by bustling crowds or commemorative ceremonies, but by the measured, unseen efforts to safeguard memory itself. Here, restoration is a dialogue between past and present, conducted in the language of careful preservation and subtle intervention. The battered bunkers, long surrendered to the elements, are gently stabilized against the relentless advance of tide and wind. Their crumbling facades are treated with materials designed to blend seamlessly with ancient concrete, reinforcing structure while respecting the scars of history. Barriers, once intended to repel, now serve as boundaries to shield delicate ecosystems and vulnerable relics from the encroachment of time. Fences, low and unobtrusive, trace the contours of dunes and fortifications, guiding the natural flow of sand and vegetation. Grass and native flora are encouraged to reclaim the ground, their roots anchoring the shifting earth and protecting fragile remnants from erosion. Salt and moisture, ever the silent adversaries, are countered by discreet drainage channels and carefully placed stones, redirecting the flow of water away from exposed artifacts. The corroded skeletons of obstacles and machinery are shielded with protective coatings, slowing the inexorable march of rust without altering the ghostly outlines they cast upon the sand. Even the air is monitored. Sensors, hidden from view, track minute changes in humidity and temperature, alerting to the subtle threats that weather may pose to the enduring sentinels of stone and steel. The delicate balance between preservation and decay is maintained with quiet precision, ensuring that the echoes of the past persist, undisturbed yet protected. No new monuments rise here. Instead, the existing forms are honoured through restraint, their stories preserved in the very fabric of the land. Omaha Beach remains a living archive, its memory safeguarded not through spectacle, but through a silent, ongoing commitment to stewardship. In the hush between wind and wave, the legacy of Omaha endures, its preservation as much an act of reverence as remembrance.